Hello, everybody. It is, excuse me, it is Monday, the first day of Shvat. It's actually the Rosh Hashanah Lilanot, the New Year of the Trees, according to Beit Shammai. And you have joined me for Pirkei Avot History and Hashkafa, Pirkei Avot History and Religious Belief and Thought, Outlook, brought to you by in the context of the shiurim of the ongoing educational program of the Tel Aviv International Synagogue under the inspired leadership of Rabbi Ariel Constantine. I had the privilege of being in the synagogue this past Shabbat, and as usual, it was wonderful. It's for those of you who live in the Tel Aviv area, or those of you even who don't, I strongly advise you to check it out. They now have a morning minyan with breakfast and shiur, and Shabbat there is very, very special. So that's so much for the ad. We unfortunately had to take a couple of week break. We've been a little bit erratic in terms of this year, for the simple reason that there have been family issues that I've had to deal with, health issues, not mine, but others in my family, and unfortunately that has taken has had to take priority. But I will try to get back on the sick and be more consistent in terms of these classes. We have a lot of Pirkei Avot to still work our way through. When we last met, we had begun to discuss the second Mishnah in the third chapter of Pirkei Avot, which is attributed to the amazing Rabbi Akiva ben Joseph, really one of the towering figures of Jewish history and Jewish intellectual history, and in the history of the interpretation and application of Torah. A person of really modest origins, who, at the end of the day, takes his place in the pantheon of Jewish greats, along with Maimonides, Nachmanides, Rabbi Judah the Prince, Hillel, whoever else you might want. In any event, we're in Mishnah number 14, and the text is as follows. Hu haya omer, Rabbi Akiva was wont to say, Chaviv adam shenivra b'tzelem, beloved is man, who is created in the image of God. Chiba yitera nodat lo. There was an extra status, an extra beauty, an extra affection that God bears man over men, and women. Obviously, man is here as a generic, over above all the other parts of creation. Shenivra b'tzelem, because only man was created in the image of God. Shene'amar, as it is written in the book of Genesis, in the first chapter, B'tzelem Elokim, this is the 9th chapter, B'tzelem Elokim asa et ha'adam. God fashioned man in his own image. Then he goes on, it says, Chavivin Yisrael, and among all of the nations of the world, Israel is especially beloved of God. Shenikra'u banim lamakom, because they were called the children of the omnipresent. That's what makom. Makom means place, but makom means the rabbis explain the use of the word the God is the place. Hu mikomo shalolam ve'en olam mikomo. The world does not comprehend him, but he comprehends the entire world. He is the context in which we all function. Chibani itera nodat lahem. And as a result, there's a special, really a special affection which God bears us, bears the Jews. Shenikra'u banim l'makom, and because we are the Jews who have been called His children, we have a special degree of affection that He bears us. Shene'amar, as it is written, a verse in the book of Deuteronomy, banim atem l'Hashem, you are children, or you are the children of God, Elokechem. Not only that, Chavivin Yisrael, beloved is Israel, who were given a kli chemda, a very precious vessel, which of course is the Torah. Chibai Torah nodat lahem, and as a result, there was a special affection that he bore the Jews who accepted the Torah, took his special vessel. Shenitan lahem klichem, that because the Torah was given to them, this precious vessel was given to them, and by the way, if you can't. I think it should be obvious. I think you can't say that unless the person receives it, they can't. If I give it, the other person doesn't receive, there's no transaction. So over here also, I mean, the fact that the Jews accepted the Torah is part of it. But the fact of the matter is that God decided that we should receive the Torah because He thought that it was appropriate that we should be the ones to accept it. Shabbat Nivra Olam, because the world was created by means of the Torah. So a lot of questions about a lot of these formulations here. Shenamar, and then he brings a verse from the book of Proverbs in the 4th chapter. For I have given you a precious possession. Do not abandon my Torah. How do you know? I mean, so the verse has nothing to do with the verses when they're cited in rabbinic literature or anywhere. Usually supposed to prove the contention, right? So up until now, it's been fine. As many problems as are raised by the passage, you are the children of God. It says you're children of God, so that's fine. But what this verse has to do with the fact that the world is based on, the world is predicated upon the existence and the observance and the maintenance of Torah is no wise obvious from this verse. Those of you who go to the synagogue on Saturday morning know this verse. For I've given you a special possession. Don't abandon my Torah. They sing this before as part of the series of verses that you sing before you put the Torah back in the ark in the Torah just before Musaf. But it doesn't fit. So let's go back and take a look at the structure of the Mishnah, because there's a lot to unpack here, and we're not going to finish it today either. So first of all, last time we talked about the fact that the Mishnah begins with universal assertion that God specifically loves humankind over and above animals, because man and women created in the image of God. They were created to be equal and egalitarian are not the same thing, but certainly of equal value, because there is gender differentiation of one sort or another within at least traditional Judaism. Non-traditional Judaism is totally egalitarian as well, but that's not what emerges from the Bible. In any event, and clearly it's not what Rabbi Akiva was discussing here, but the superiority of man and women is over and above the animal kingdom, and the vegetative kingdom is fairly straightforward here. And last time we talked about the fact that the Torah has two dimensions to it. I don't mean to trivialize, but the Torah was given as the guide for mankind to live. And it wasn't just given to the Jews, in the sense that God did not create humankind and just say, okay, go, you figure it out yourselves. No, there's a manual. I mean, guys are a problem. You have guys never read directions. So, but there is a manual, and the manual is the Torah. And every single human being has commandments, has a guidebook that he is supposed to use to serve God as God wishes him to live his life on this earth. But there is, I don't know, a hierarchy, but certainly a variation. In other words, the Orthodox rabbinic tradition teaches that first of all, God cares about all human beings, and He wants all human beings to have a relationship with Him, and He wants all human beings to pray to Him, and He wants all human beings to be moral individuals, and He wants all human beings, because they're created in the image of God, to have a place in the world to come. His love for His creatures is not confined under any circumstances to the Jews, and anybody who says otherwise really is distorting the Torah. But there is something of a hierarchy. or at least a process of intensification. The whole world has 7 mitzvot. And those are the broad categories of morality which people are expected to follow and which guarantee them a place in the world to come. And by the way, the world to come, eternity, no matter what, if you're a believer, the eternity is by definition longer than 60, 70. I read someplace that the person who is going to live 200 years has already been born. Okay, but even after 200 years, it's still going to be, there's still eternity. And eternity is earned, at least in the simple reading of rabbinic literature and so on, by obeying God's, by living one's life in accordance to God's command and God's dictates. So what? So there is so the average Joe, the average person has 7 commandments that he or she is supposed to observe. What are they? So first of all, you're not supposed to worship idols. It's not really idols. You're not supposed to worship false worship. What's false worship? Worshipping anybody else but the Creator of heaven and earth. Period. In other words, there is an expectation that every single person is supposed to acknowledge God and live the life accordingly. It's interesting. That's and there's no there were different opinions among the rabbis on this issue in the Middle Ages, but if you read the prophets, it's fairly clear, and Maimonides actually picks this up as well, that even at the end of days, there is no real expectation everybody's going to be Jewish when the Messiah comes, but rather that everybody will acknowledge God and live according to their part of this assignment. So a number of mitzvot they're supposed to have. Number 1, point of departure is belief in one God who created heaven and earth outside of time, outside of space, and established rules and norms of morality which are outside of our individual. In other words, they're equanimous. That's the fancy word. In other words, we don't take them up ourselves, but the broad categories God provides for us. Okay, so that's one. Another one is you're not supposed to curse God. What's the big deal to curse God? I mean, God can't get hurt. God is, we'll get to this. I don't think we'll get this today, but we'll get to this next week, I think. God is obviously not physical. We assume, the norm has been for a zillion years, that God has no shape or form. You can't hit God. What you can do is be aggressive and deeply disrespectful by cursing God. Why? Not that you can affect God that way, but that's sort of the most aggressive thing one can do, the most rebellious thing that one can do vis-a-vis God directly. So cursing God by use of words, which are the means by which God is communicated to us, because basically that's what bridges the gap between the other, eternity and transcendence and us is God's word. Then using that as a mode of abuse of a sublime thing. In fact, the image of God, according to many, the earliest Aramaic translation of the Bible, it goes back to the Second Temple. Well, I'll go back to the time of the rabbis at least. Is that the way that the man being created in the humankind being created in the image of God kinds of expression is in our capacity for speech. So speech, if they say, well, there's no difference between people and dolphins or people and chimpanzees. Communication, rough communication, and sophisticated thought are not the same. And I often think that that we do ourselves an injustice and we do the animals an injustice if we said, it's all the same. The ability to think the ability to speak means to be able to conceptualize. It means to be able to see beyond that which one encounters in the physical world. It means the ability to rationalize, the ability to be intellectualized. One's mind, one's brain, which is part, not the whole soul, but part of the soul, all is expressed and communicated through speech. So therefore, Birkat Hashem, which is simply Birkat doesn't mean blessing God, but it really is a euphemism for cursing God. Means to take all of that and turn it upside down and use it aggressively and antagonistically towards the God who gave it to us. So that is rule number 2. If you want, it includes gratitude towards God, an awareness of that people are, or at least can be, godlike. Next, number 3 is essential sexual morality. This is not a popular topic today, but essential sexual morality. Incest is forbidden. Even if you're madly in love with a relative, either a married relative, person if an in-law, what you would want to say, or a blood relative, one is not allowed to violate the boundaries of one's sexual attractions. One's supposed to challenge them, channel them. That, as I said, is a very unfortunately not popular position in many ways, and but there are very clear lines that the Torah sets down both for Jews and for all of mankind in terms of how one should channel and how one should use and how one should not abuse one's sexual instincts. That is number 3. Number 4, thou shalt not steal. Now, thou shalt not steal is not just a question of like taking something which is not yours. It's also a matter of violating boundaries. There is me and there is you, and I'm not allowed to go into something which is yours. So in sexual behavior, you're supposed to respect, to keep a distance from the persona of somebody else, and here you keep away from their things. In general, it's an interesting observation. A friend of mine, unfortunately, passed away during Corona. Unfortunately, Rabbi Shlomo Rosenberg, or Stevie Rosenberg of Teaneck, New Jersey, an old and dear friend, once pointed out. He said, it's funny. It was often said that we are what we eat and we are what we have. As we become the things that we have, we become the things that we eat. Judaism has it the other way around. You express yourself through that which which your personality is expressed in what you choose to consume and what you choose to have, because you create the space around you by expressing your outside. By expressing that way. In other words, you express your inner self by surrounding yourself with things which express that inner self. I would like to think, and no, I have not read every single thing in this book, in this room, so don't be overly impressed. If anything, I walk into my library and I get depressed because there's so much to learn and so much to do. In any event, but the point is that what a person owns and the way that they decorate their house is expression of them. Therefore, if I come and steal, if I damage it, or if I steal it, then I really am indirectly, or maybe directly, not just invading your space, but attacking you, the you who chose this thing to express themselves. So in other words, it's a violation of one's of not just one's things, but of one's inner essence, which was expressed by these things that you stole. So okay, certainly, I'm not doing this in order, obviously. One's not allowed to kill. I'm sorry, one's not allowed to murder. There's a difference between kill and murder. A person is allowed under all circumstances to kill somebody who comes to attack them. Self-defense is a sacred right. But to murder is to take away from somebody else the most precious thing that they have, and that's life. So what do we have? We have not worshiping false worship, not cursing God, not sexual morality, not stealing, and not murdering. That's 5. What are the last 2? The last 2 are, interestingly, first, number 6 is dinim or dayanim. Every single society is mandated by God to legislate a system of laws by which regulates the relations between people justly. I have to figure out what justice is. Those of you who studied the Republic, Plato's Republic, whether we were in high school or in college or maybe afterwards, know that that's what what's justice is. Is the center of the whole book. But whatever justice is, which is for another time, the point of the one is people are obligated by God to set up a just system of laws, of checks and balances, to protect the individual, the integrity and the individual rights and property and reputation of every single member of whatever the state or polity is. That's part of it. But also, one is supposed to, non-Jews are obligated by God to set up a system of enforcement. That means courts, that means police, to make sure that these laws are followed and that people that are malefactors will be punished. According to the rabbis, originally there were only 6 of these commandments that were given to Adam. After Noah, according to the rabbis in the Tractate Sanhedrin, after the flood, Noah was given the right to eat animals. I mean, man was a vegetarian; he wasn't vegan. All right, you want to be a vegan, be a vegan. It's not my problem. But he wasn't a vegan; he was a vegetarian. But after the flood, mankind was allowed to take the life of other animals. I mean, ideally, you don't take the life of animals, but after the flood, you were allowed. And another rule was added to mankind. Yes, you are allowed to take the life of another animal, but another animal is another being. Therefore, when you take that life, you do it in the most humane, painless way possible. You do not, it's called aver menacha. You make sure before you help yourself to the meat of an animal that the animal is dead and does not feel further pain. The idea of concern for animals, animal welfare, in Hebrew it's called tzar balei chayim, the worrying about the feelings and the pain that are inflicted on an animal, is a universal value which devolves upon all of mankind according to the Torah, according to those 7 mitzvot, that now 7 mitzvot, that all men and women are obliged to follow. It's funny. I thought that I said, like, who would eat a live animal? Who wouldn't wait until the animal died? But the truth of the matter is that I discovered in high school. I remember we had I don't know, those of you who were in elementary school in the 60s and 70s maybe remembered, used to have these National Geographic movies of life in Africa and in Australia and around the world and all kinds of stuff. And I remember as a kid seeing a National Geographic movie of tribesmen who had caught a giraffe, and they were busy butchering the giraffe while the giraffe was alive. And I thought it was horrible. So I said, why do they do that? The answer is because apparently it tastes better, the meat from the giraffe, and I assume it's true of other animals, it tastes better when it's butchered before the animal actually dies. There's more blood in the system. I don't know. That's exactly what the Torah says don't do. You can be the greatest gourmand in the world, but not at the expense of an animal's and of an animal's pain. And that is obviously supposed to teach us to be compassionate, not just to animals, but to each other. Those who would argue that those who would admonish people for being cruel to animals but don't really care about what they'll do to each other, that's an inversion of Jewish morality. But nevertheless, sensitivity to the pains of other beings is something. By the way, just stop, and that by the way is true. It finds expression even in the laws that evolve upon Jews. One of the things people are not aware of is that on Shabbat it's well known that you shouldn't put on the lights and all kinds of stuff. Don't cook, all kinds of stuff. But one of the things one's not allowed to do on Shabbat is to take a life. Obviously not take a human life. You're never allowed to take human life, unless self-defense. But you're not supposed to step on an ant. Why? Because on Shabbat, everybody's human control of the world is suspended, and the truth. But so even taking the life of an ant is not acceptable. But you know what? It's not. I would argue that that's true even. I would argue that that's true even during the week. Now that doesn't mean if you're inundated with ants that you shouldn't get rid of them or exterminate them or whatever because they bother you or whatever. But it strikes me that just to kill ants or bugs or whatever just because would absolutely be a violation of what the Torah had in mind in terms of respect for the rest of God's creations. Anyways, so Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem, that man, beloved is man who is created in the image of God because of his superiority. He has a special effect. God bears a special affection to men and women because they're created in His image, because they live according to these laws of morality and create just societies in which they live their 60, 70, 80, 90, 200 years, and then come back to Him, capital H. In other words, Rabbi Akiva, who's interesting, who's always known as a national hero, he was one of the leaders of the revolt against Rome at the time of Bar Kokhba, starts his discussion of people, not with Jews, but with just being people. And he emphasizes as a result the fundamental universalist element, context in which Judaism, which the Torah is given, which Judaism functions. And I'll take one more, and I'll take it one step further. What I think it's important to note the fact that he starts with a universalistic statement about the value of all humankind, and then goes on to discuss the Jewish people, the people of Israel, and giving of the Torah, means that Jews are separate and yet are never, ever, ever supposed to separate themselves totally from mankind. We function separately within the context of mankind, and we are always part of the broader whole, and should always remember that. There's this was expressed beautifully by Rabbi Soloveitchik on many occasions. He would state this central truth of Judaism by invoking the address or the approach that Abraham, according to the Bible, Abraham made to the people of Hebron after Sarah dies. At the beginning of the second reading of the Torah, called Chayei Sarah, which describes the death and then the burial of the purchase of the Machpelah cave at Hebron, and the subsequent burial of Sarah in that cave, purchase of the cave. Abraham says, Avram Avinu, Abraham our father, says to the collected council of Hebron, Ger v'toshav anochi imachem. I am a stranger and a citizen and a resident among you. So Reb Soloveitchik says, wait a minute, what do you mean? If you're a stranger, then you're not a citizen. If you're a citizen, you're not a stranger. So what's going on? So Reb Soloveitchik always said on many, many occasions that the Jew is simultaneously, with Jews it's never either or. A Jew is simultaneously both a stranger and a resident. He's an integral part of humanity, and therefore when Rabbi Akiva starts talking about the relationship between God and mankind, he has to start with mankind, doesn't start with Israel. But he's also a stranger. We have concerns and values and tasks that are separate and only our own. That's a hard thing to balance, and one of the more difficult things to get used to is this idea that you are simultaneously part of the world and concerned with yourself or with our Jewish people as a whole. One sees that there's a tendency among Jews, contemporary Jewry, to choose sides. Well, I'm only universal. Okay, my being a Jew means that I have to be for everybody. but I don't do anything for myself or for my people per se. In fact, that has been declared racist by some Jewish leaders, some Jewish thinkers. Other Jews say, no, I really don't care what happens among the non-Jews. I don't care what goes on in the rest of the world. It's not my problem. I worry about my mitzvahs. I worry about my world. And that's it. Both approaches are wrong. The hard path, and that's why all these passages are part of the same Mishnah here by Rabbi Akiva, there's no question in that regard. I'm not giving sermons. This is really how you have to read the text, is that you're simultaneously both. Now, what happens when there's a contradiction and there's tension between the two? All right, that you have to deal with. And there are ways to deal with it. And contemporary Jews are not the first people to address these kinds of issues. Okay, so that is it for today. We will continue, please God, next week. And in the meantime, have a good week and bye.